Hey, I'm Steve Krenz for Guitar Gathering. Thank you for joining us on this quick lesson on how to arrange songs for guitar, creating chord progressions that captivate, that go beyond the normal. Gosh, if your playing is just a series of 1, 4, 5 chords in an endless varying combinations, you gotta, it's a little game with yourself how you can make that interesting. That's what we're gonna talk about tonight. So there is a PDF that goes along with this. The link is in the YouTube description down below. I'm gonna give you about 8, 9, 10, I don't know, different tools that I use to arrange a song and make the chords of a simple 3-chord song into something special, unique, captivating, something engaging for the listener to listen to. All right, let's talk about this. So if you look at the first page of the PDF, we're going to use the song Silent Night. It's currently Christmas time when we're filming this, and so we're going to use the song Silent Night as our backdrop chord progression. So the normal progression of chords in Silent Night, if I was to play that, would be G. It just stays on a G. Then it goes to the 5 chord, a D. Then back to the 1 chord. Then it goes to the 4 chord. Back to the 1 chord. Back to the 4 chord. 1 chord, key of G. The 5 chord. Back to the 1 chord. The 5 chord. Okay, so I believe that comes out to about 24 measures long of basically 1, 4, and 5 in the key of G. So the G is the 1 chord. If I go up 4 steps, G, A, B, C, that's a C major, that's the 4 chord. If I go up 1 more, that's D, that's the 5 chord. So 1, 4, and 5. All right, so that's what we're talking about. Let's create something magical with these 4 chords. So turn over to the next page. Here are some guidelines. Here's the rules that the lanes that we're gonna be trying to stay between. I just gave you a couple of them there. First one, I want to try and not have a chord or even just a voicing of a chord that emphasizes a note that is going to clash with the current melody note that is in effect. So that's rule number 1. Rule number 2 is you need to always let your ear be your guide. I'm going to give you a bunch of different tools you can use to try and throw some chord substitutions and do some magic here with this, and it's not going to work for everything. You have to let your ear be your guide, and not every chord substitution and tool that I'm telling you about here is going to work in every situation. Let your ear be your guide. Okay, so those are the 2 things. Another thing I want to say is we're dealing with the progressions. The chords are moving. I'm not talking about how I can, make a G into a G2 or a G into a G major 7th and add a G major 9th to it. I'm not talking about that. That's kind of ornamentation. I'm just kind of adding color tones onto a regular chord. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm going to talk about is progressions, how the chords are moving within this thing. All right, so there's the basic progression. I played that for you. 1, 4, 5. Let's turn to page 2, and let's do a simple thing that we can do. Number 1, the easiest tool I can grab out of my little toolbox for this is chord inversions. So what do I mean by that? Is each chord has there's like 3 notes that make up a simple triad, the 1, the 3, the 5. Usually, we have, as the lowest tone in the chord, the root, the 1. So in a G chord, I typically voice a G chord with the G as the lowest tone. But I could just as easily have the B as the lowest tone, or even a D as the lowest tone. It's still a G chord, but it's got a different bass note that is part of the chord tone. So let's play, or let's just with that one little tool, let's see if we can create a little bit more interesting progression. So take a look at the example on page 2. If I start there, I go down, G, da, 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 G with a B in the bass, da, 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 already we've got something that's a little bit more interesting. Look at the first few bars there. Well, the first 4 bars in the song, if you'll notice on page 1, it was just a 1 chord for 4 bars. Da 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 dum, da 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 dum. It just kept going. All right, so what did we do? We added some inversions there. Da 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 da. Adding inversions gives the sensation of movement in your progression, even though I'm not really going anywhere. I'm just putting a different note in the bass. Now, you can use inversions to kind of help you get to other chords. Like if I want to get to a C chord and I'm on a G, I could do a G with a B in the bass, and then hit the C, and that little G, B, C kind of makes a nice little transition lift there. But that's one tool that I can use, is just do some inversions, mix some inversions in there. And again, let your ear be your guide. Take a look at the second one. This is the second tool I can use there on page 3. And another option that we can use is a concept called relative chords. All right, so here's the deal. Here's the gig. For each major chord, there is a relative chord, a relative minor chord. So major chords have relative minors, minor chords have relative majors. It's like 2 sides of the same coin. They use a lot of the same notes, and so they can be used as interchangeable substitutes for each other. For example, if I'm on a G chord, which is a major chord, here's the rule. If I go up to the 6th step of the G major scale, G, A, B, C, D, E, and make it minor, I get an E minor chord. So E minor and G major are in this uniquely special relationship called relative. What that means is that E minor is the relative minor of G major, and G major is the relative major of E minor. So each major and minor chord have a partner, a brother, and the 2 sides of the same coin. So so if a C chord and an A minor chord are related like this. So if I'm on a major chord, I go up 6 steps, and that's the minor. If I'm on the minor chord, I go up to its minor third, or up 2 steps in the minor scale. So if I'm on an E minor, I go F sharp and then do a G, and then that's the relative major. So there's only 12 keys. I know it seems like, oh gosh, Steve, you're doing all this math. Once you kind of figure this out one time, they're always the same. So G major and E minor, those 2 are paired together. Another one I want you to focus on is C major and A minor. Those can be used interchangeably. Now, those are the 1 chord and the 4 chord. Now, you can do it on other chords too, like the 5 chord. That would be a D major and a B minor, but that one doesn't work as well. Why? I don't know. It just doesn't work as well. So it works, using relative majors and minors and flipping them works best on the 1 chord and the 4 chord. Okay? So here's what I mean by that. So let's just pretend, I didn't write this out, but let's just pretend I'm going to look at the first progression, the very one on page 1. And for every G, I'm going to play an E minor. For every D, I'm going to play a B minor, and you'll see how that doesn't work. For every C, I'm going to play an A minor. So it kind of works, but you'll see how it very differently changes the character. So this is going to go purely relative majors and minors. So there's the melody note, and I'm going to start on it instead of the G. I'm going to play an E minor, so it'll sound darker and richer. Dun, da, dun, dun, dun. Da, dun, da. Instead of this D, I'm going to play a B minor. Da. Do you see how that doesn't sound right? Then back to E minor. Dum, dun, dun. For the C, I'm going to play an A minor. Da, 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 da. A minor. Da, da. Da, 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 E minor, da, da, da. Here's the D, so I'm not going to play a B minor. I'm just going to stick with a D. Da, 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 E minor, da, 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 So it works, but it's just a different flavor of it. All right, so now you wouldn't do it purely like I just did it there. Okay, you would do it where you're kind of mixing them in. So take a look at page 3. And I'm just gonna mix these chords in here and see if this creates a little bit more of an interesting progression. So take a look at this, page 3. Dum, da, 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 dum. Inversion there. Inversion there. Dum. Here comes the relative minor. Da, 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 da. Now the relative minor of the G. Da, dum. A minor. Da, 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 da. Major. And the relative minor. Da, 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 da. Went instead of the G there, I went to the relative minor. Da, 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 dum, dum. All right, so you'll notice I'm kind of building on each other. I've got inversions, and now I'm using some of these relative major and minor flipping. So I can flip these relative majors and minors. You'll hear this all the time. A lot of times when you're doing even in church or when you're playing simple songs and there's got like 4 verses that are the same, they'll take that third one and they will flip to the relative major or minor, and the melody still works, but it's got now a different character to it. So you'll hear this trick used all the time. So a lot of times, if you're trying to create a magical arrangement, it doesn't just hit you like a bolt of lightning. You use some of these tools, and so that's a good one there. All right, take a look at the next page. Ooh, okay, here we go. Let's do another one. Let's look at a third tool that we can do. All right, so we've got a dominant. What's a third tool we can use to create magical, captivating chord progressions? One of them is I can use a dominant 7th that's going to resolve to the target chord, which is going to be after it. So I'm going to look at these key chords, and I'm going to look at the chord right in front of those key chords, right, that precedes it, and I'm going to make that a 5 chord of whatever chord I'm going to. So let's go back to our chords like we were thinking. So if in G is the 1, G, A, B, C, D, D would be the 5 chord, which is a unique chord, and we're going to make that we're going to add the 7th to it, so make it like a D 7th. So 5 chords go to 1 chords, D 7ths go to G. If I want to go to a C, well, I think I look at its 5, so C, D, E, F, G, G, and I do a G 7th, I add that 7th to it, and then that G 7th will get me to a C. And it works just as well for major and minor. Let's say I want to go to an A minor. Well, what's the 5th step of an A minor? A, B, C, D, E. That's an E. I make it an E 7th, and an E 7th will go to an A minor. So it's like the door that gets you into that, it gets you to that chord. So let's see how this works. If I'm in G, at D 7th leads me to that G. Okay, so if I want to go to a C, here's a C. Okay, so I'm going to throw its 5, a G7 before that. So I threw a little G 7th before that C. Let's say I'm going to an A minor. So my target chord is an A minor, it's coming up, and I'm going to throw in right before that A minor its 5, which is a E7. And you see how the 5 chord works well to land me into these target chords. All right, with that in mind, take a look at page 4. All right, let's see how if we do this trick, let's see how that sounds. Starting on the verse there. G, da, 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 da. All this is normal. Here comes a D, and then I'm going to throw a D 7th in here. Da, 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 da. Hear that G7 that's going to help me get to this C. Da, da, da. Here's a quick one. Da, da. Quick 5 of the G. Da, 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 da. 5 of the C. C. Da. Quick D7. Da, da, da. Da, da, da. D. Here comes a D7. Da, 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 da. Da, 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 da. And if I was going to turn this around and play this song again, I'll throw a little D7, which would be like the 5 of the upcoming first measure G. Now, it doesn't work on everything. For example, if I did this again, and let me throw a little B7 right in front of that E minor 7th, okay? Da, 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 or sorry, da, 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 da. There's I threw in a little A7 before that D, so see how that sounded funny. Da, 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 D7, da, da, da. Let's throw a little E7 before this A minor. Da, da, da. It worked, but it was kind of took. Da, 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 da. Throw in that E7 again. Da, da, da. So some of them work better than others, and it's like cooking. Depending on how much spice you want to throw in there, you kind of season it to taste for how far you want to take this. But it's another tool. So we've got inversions. We've got our dominant 7th chord ones. What did we have before that? We had the relative chord trick that we can use. Let's go to another one. Take a look at page 5. All right. Just like the 5-7 leads to any chord, to get to any chord, you go to its 5, whether it's major or minor. Just like that works, I can go one more level back and use a 2, which is a minor chord, to the 5, and then the 1. So if I was in G, instead of just going a D7, G, I can do a little G, A minor, A2, 5, 1. So instead of just a 5, 1, now I'm backing it up one more, and I'm doing a 2, 5, 1. And those 2s like to be minor chords. So 2s like to go to 5s, when 5s like to go to 1s. So using this little 2, 5, 1 trick, if I was in the key of G, a 2, 5, 1 to get me to a G would be an A minor, the 2 chord in the key of G, G, A, D7th, add that 7th on those dominants. And dominant doesn't mean important. It means it's the name of that chord. There's subdominants and tonics and things like that, and this is called the dominant. So don't get confused on that. The 5-7, that's a D, D7 to the G, A minor, D, G. Well, let's say I wanted to get to a C chord. Well, its 5 would be a G7. Its 2 would be a D minor. So you can use these 2 5s to get to major chords. You can also use them to get to minor chords, but there's one little exception that happens when you go to a minor chord. Let's say I wanted to go to an E minor. Its 2 would be an F sharp, but instead of minor, I'm going to make it a minor 7 flat 5. But Steve, I don't know any minor 7 flat 5s. Well, that's good. That's why I wrote them out there. All these chords, I put them in there. And then what's the 5 of an E chord? Would be a B7 and to the minor. So when I'm resolving to minor, the 2 chord becomes a minor 7 flat 5. So let's take a look and see how this is now changed our little progression here. All right, what do we have here on page 5? Dum, da, dum, 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 da, da, da. Do you see how that was a 2-5 up the upcoming G? Da. Here's a quick 2-5 of the C. Da, da. 2-5 of the G. Da, 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 da. 2-5 of the C. Da, da, da. 2-5 of the G, da, 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 da. That was a little 2-5 of a D, da, da. Now let's look at the top chords first. 2-5 of the G, da, 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 da. A minor 2, da, da, 5, da, 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 da. Instead of a 5 to get me back, let's do our turnaround. Well, I'm going to do a 2. Okay, well, that sounds pretty good. Let's go to, look at that last line, that second measure of that last line. What if I went in that third measure, instead of a G, I went to an E minor, which I can do. That's a relative major and minor switch. Let's say if I went to the E minor, well, then I would have a different 2-5 going to it. I'd have the F sharp minor, 7 flat 5, to the B7 to the E minor. Let's hear how that sounds. Da, 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 da. Sounded pretty good. I like that. Da, 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 da. That's the minor way. If I do it major, da, 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 da. Another little way of doing this. Okay, flip over the page. This chord progression is getting more and more interesting with each passing page. Take a look at page 6. All right, we've learned inversions. We've learned relative majors and minors. We've learned dominance. We've learned 2-5s can precede a chord. All right, so let's talk about another way that we can resolve to a chord. We can resolve to a chord by preceding it by a half step below and using a diminished chord. Okay, so let's say I'm on a G chord and I want to get to a C chord. That's my target chord. So before that C chord, I'm going to go a half step down and play a B diminished. And that's going to help me get to that C. So instead of a 5 going to the C or a 2-5 going to the C like we did in the last two, I'm just going to go a half step below it and play a diminished chord. Okay, so that works. And that works just as well going to a major chord to a minor chord. Just go whatever you're going to, go a half step before it, half step down, play a diminished chord, and that'll help you get there. So let's see how this sounds. Take a look at page, what is that, page 5. I'm sorry, page 6. Page 6. All right, so what do we have here? Dum, da, dum, dum. Dum, da, dum. Now look, 2 measures from this, I'm trying to land on an A minor, so I'm going to go a half step before that A minor and play a G sharp diminished. Dum, A minor, dum. Where'd the A minor come from? That's the relative minor of C. Remember, we did that a few pages back. Dum, dum. Now I'm going to an E minor here in 2 measures, so I'm going to precede that E minor just a half step down and do a D sharp diminished. Dum, 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 dum. Oh, here's our 2-5, but instead of the 5, I'm going to do this little half step below that C and do a diminished chord. Dum, dum, da, dum, da, dum, dum. There's that B diminished going to the C. Dum, da, dum, da, dum, dum. Now I'm going to an E minor and 2 bars, so I'm going to precede that by a D sharp diminished. Dum, da, 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 dum, 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 da, 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 dum, dum. So I'm just preceding certain chords, not every chord. I'm just seasoning it to taste, right? And I'm throwing an occasional diminished chord in there. All right. Gary is asking a question. In my tool number 2 example, all right, Let's see what we got here. You're asking here. When playing the relative minor, E minor instead of G, use the E minor 7. Any particular reason for that? Oh, yes. The E minor, the chord progressions are starting to sound a little bit more complicated, so I thought I would at least get them out of triad land. And so we're not doing ninths and 11ths yet, but I am throwing an occasional 7th just to get just to get a little bit more harmonic interest there. And sometimes that helps with the voicing of the chord to make it sound like they connect together. So the trick is not just the chord and making it work. You have to make the voicing work into the next voicing. So sometimes I have to, voicing things a little bit different helps that. All right. Hey, take a look at what do we got? Okay, so that was diminished chords preceding a chord. I've only got a couple more for you. I know your heads are spinning. All right, we're going to be done with this in just a minute. Tool number 6. Let's give you a couple more. Tool number 6. I can do a diminished chord as kind of an alternate 4 chord. And I'm going to do that a half step up from a 4 chord. So instead of the 4 chord is going to be here, and instead of preceding it, this is going to be after the 4 chord. I'm going to throw this sharped 4 diminished chord. So look what happens here. So for example, if I'm after a C chord, I would slip in a C sharp diminished and then go on my merry way after that. So take a look at this example on page 7. Dum. All this is normal. Da, dum, dum. Here's an inversion. Da, dum. Here comes our first 4 chord. Da, 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 da. Do you hear how that works? Fine. It's kind of like an alternate 4 chord. If I have 2 bars of a 4, I can throw that second bar, go a half step up from the 4, and do a sharp 4 diminished, and it works. Da, 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 da. Here it is again. Da, 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 da. And the rest of this is normal. Da, 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 da. All right, it's pretty much normal after that. Take a look at the next one. So that's another little trick, but it only works on the 4 chord. Only works on the 4 chord. So some of these have different little parameters. This one, that little sharp 4 diminished thing after the 4 chord only works on the 4 chord. You can't pull that on other chords. It doesn't work. Take a look at the last page. Okay, we're getting to the bonus round here, kids. Getting out of the baby pool. Another way that I can create interesting sounding progressions is just by starting to have a line that moves. So the easiest way to have this, it's a common thread. So I've got my chords that are coming through, but I've got this line now that is threading through these chords, and it's going in a specific direction, either ascending or descending. Okay, that sounds more complicated than it is. And so I'm going to start it on the bass line, and you can hear what I mean. So let me just play this first one. Dum, da, dum, 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 da, dum, dum, da, da, dum, da, dum, dum. Now here the bass line's going to go up. Dum, da, 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 da. Da, 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 da. It's going to go up again. Da, 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 da. Little 5 of the upcoming A minor. Da, 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 da. The 2-5-1 of the E minor. Da, da, da. Whoa, what happened there? I just went down. E, D, C sharp, and threw an A on top of that. Then continuing going down, C, da, 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 da. So sometimes you can thread a little line through these chords, and it will take you to unexpected places. But Steve, it doesn't make sense what you're doing. What's making it work is that this line is threading between these progressions, so these major chords. So it'll take me to different places along the way. G, D with the F sharp, da, Da, dun, dun. Do you see how the line is just going down? Now it starts another one, and we're going to descending a different way. Da, 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 da. This is all normal. Now the bass lines are going to go up. Now I'm going to go to the A minor, which is the relative major of this, relative minor of the C, and do an ascending bass line there. Da, da, da. Oh, ho, 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 ho. Do you hear how interesting that diminished chord sounds there? But Steve, why didn't you do a B flat major or a B flat minor? Well, I don't know. It's just kind of a transition chord, and a lot of times diminished chords work particularly well as kind of connecting chords between two chords. Da, 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 da. Hey, whoa, 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 where'd that E7 come from? That's the 5 of the A minor. Da, da, da. I'm going to an E minor in the next measure, so I'm going to do a little 2-5. Remember the 2 when resolving to minor is a minor 7 flat 5. Da, 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 da. So you can move these bass lines around to create some interesting, unexpected movement. And where otherwise that chord may not work at all, you can make it work by threading a little common line through there. And so that's another idea that you can do there. Okay? So that's one way of doing a thread through a progression. Let me show you another one. I didn't write this one down, but I've got this on my notes here. So what if we did an inner line moving? What if we did, instead of the bass line moving, we moved an inner line? So here on this D, on this G chord, I'm going to take the 5th, and I'm just going to start moving him up. Da, 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 da. Hey, that worked out really nicely. Now remember, not all of them are going to work. I just went... That worked out, seemed to work out nicely, doing an inner line moving. Da, 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 da. What if I went minor there? Da. So I took that E of the C major and went down to an E flat. Da, 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 da. Da, 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 D to a D sharp diminished, da, 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 E minor. What if I went down chromatically there? Da, da. So I still got to that A with a C sharp, but I just walked myself down. Da. Ooh, what if I kept going? Da, 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 da. Ooh, ha. Getting into some fun things, kids. All right, one more. Can I squeeze one more in you? Let's just, surprises. This is the last tool I have written down here. Surprises. You just take a chord and you make it go somewhere else, and it's the surprises in life that sometimes make a good progression interesting. So I'm going to do my best to talk through this one. So I'm going to do a G, then I'm going to do an F 13th. Da, da. Oh, that's a good one. G to an F 13th, and kind of a subtonic there. Da, E minor, then an... Oh, what's that? That's kind of a C minor 6th with an E flat in the bass. So I've got a little descending bass line. Da, 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 A minor, da, F sharp diminished, E minor, da. Oh, here's a good one. Remember our 2-5 that was going to go to this C, D minor? But instead of the G, I'm going to do a D flat major 7, because it's going to a C major 7, so let's just put a D flat half step above. Da, da, da. All jazzy. Da, dum, da, dum, da, da, da. Now I'm going to a C, and so instead of approaching it from the 5, a G7 to the C, or a 2-5, D minor G7 C, a half step, half step diminished below, a B diminished to a C. I'm going to go for a half step from above and kind of throw a, what is that, a D flat 9th with a flatted 5th. Just hear how that takes it around a different way. Da, 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 da. Let's do that F13th again. Da, da, da. F sharp minor 11th to the B7. Da, da, E minor, da. Da. What in the world is that? That is an E flat sharp 9 sharp 5, kids. Why does it work? I don't know. I just put enough color tones in it to make it sound unique. A minor, da, da, da. A flat, 7 flat 5, da, da, da. Okay, so there was a lot to that, but let me just, I'll play and say the chords so you can have them. G, da, da, F13, E minor, down, C minor 6 with an E flat, down, A minor, down, F sharp diminished, da, down, E minor, yeah, da, D minor, D flat major 7, C major 7, down, C sharp diminished, da, down, to a G, da, D flat 9 flat 5, da, down, C down, C sharp diminished, da, da, to a G, da, F13, da, da, F sharp minor 7 flat 5, da, da, B7, da, to an E minor, da, E flat sharp 9 sharp 5, da, A minor, da, da, A flat 7 flat 5, da, 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 da. Oh, there you go. I realize we did some complicated things there, I know. But these are some of the tools at your disposal to take a normal 3-chord song, 1, 4, and 5, and make it into something magical. So there you go. There's some tools for you to practice in your own guitar learning. Hey, thanks for joining us. Learn as much as you can. Take care of yourself, and we will see you guys next time.